2 years, we operated and treated 10 times more wounded than in 10 years of war. I took those fragments that were removed by me and my fellow neurosurgeons from Moscow, and you see most of them here. Huge, bossy, heavy fragments, and these are shell fragments. We rarely operate directly on those wounded from that side whom they left and abandoned. Those military, our military took them and brought them to Mechnikov Hospital. We do not refuse, we operate. And I tell my colleagues, they say, Andrii Hryhorovich, we can't bring ourselves to operate like we do on our Ukrainian soldiers. And I say, think about one thing. You treat them, he survives, and we can exchange him for our wounded or captive, who is now in captivity. But there are organizations that just turn a blind eye to this, and they are accomplices. I mean, they invite them to moderate sections, to give reports by Russian pediatric neurosurgeons, and pediatric neurosurgeons talk about how they treat Ukrainian children, but they don't say that those who work there, tens of thousands of children they forcibly took from Ukraine to Russia without parents. They detained them and ruined their lives. Nobody talks about this. So the war continues not only on the front line, the war continues within the medical community.
Andrii, I congratulate you.
Thank you.
Last year, Volodymyr Zelensky awarded you the title National Legend of Ukraine. And it is absolutely deserved because every day at Mechnikov Hospital, you saved the lives of fighters. How did your journey start?
First of all, I want to say that this award, the award is not only for me, but for the team that works. This is the Mechnikov Hospital. Because without the help, without the participation of colleagues, we would not have been able to achieve such results and save so many lives. And indeed, both the President of Ukraine and everyone who was present, they paid tribute to the people who contribute. But without our team, it would have been impossible. It all started perhaps when I studied in school. And the first operation I performed was on a rabbit. I once mentioned it, but it was my first operation. After that, I decided to tie my life to medicine for years. Focused, became a neuro-oncologist, meaning a person who treats brain tumors. But I lead a Pareto Silhouette, a department specializing in the treatment of both brain tumors and severe traumatic brain injuries. And for almost 24 years, since 2000, I've been directly treating the wounded, that is, those with trauma. And I'll say this, our patients, they have only benefited from being treated. Because both I and the doctors at the Cerebral Neurosurgery Center, which I lead, specialize in neuro-oncology. Because neuro-oncology requires perfect knowledge of the brain, is the ability to work under a microscope to know the brain well. Because worldwide, they believe that craniocerebral trauma should be treated by either surgeons or traumatologists who have specialized in neurosurgery. Our injured and wounded receive the best help, which they do not get in any country in the world. Since 2014, our general director, Sergei Ryenko, gathered all the heads of departments when the war started. And he set such a task for doctors, department heads, and centers. You must provide help to our wounded as best as possible. This is the first, and the second, do it completely free. And we've been searching for opportunities and attracting help from foreign colleagues for several years. Foreign colleagues from around the world. This includes both America, Germany, England, and Sweden. And people respond. Some send equipment, expendable materials, and instruments, and some, like our esteemed professors Rocco Armonda from Washington, or Alex Volatka from Dallas, Texas, or Connor Berlin, a resident neurosurgeon from Virginia. They come, and together with them, we operate at Mechnikov Hospital conduct surgeries in just a week. Just a week, together with Professor Rocco Armonda, we performed 18 both open and endovascular interventions. And they say that your results are unique in terms of the number of injuries and the approaches you implement at the Mechnikov Hospital. What do you mean by number? In 2 years, we treated 10 times more wounded than what was treated in 10 years of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
You took on such a huge responsibility, and at the beginning of the war, there was no guideline, no video lessons on how to operate on such complex injuries, not only in Dnipro, but all over Ukraine, wherever it was possible. You actually have your book with certain lessons presented.
Indeed, when the war started, many neurosurgeons, especially those wounded near Kiev, that's Hostomel Buka, and in peaceful life, they had never operated on these patients. Andrii Grigorovich, we need your advice. I say, please send over the computer scan. They sent video computer scans. I took a skull model on the table and showed where to make incisions, the trepanation, how to remove the hematoma. They did it the next day. They wrote, Andrii Grigorovich, we did everything as you said. Here is the CT scan after surgery. The surgery went well. The patient is recovering. And then I wanted to send my previous book, Combat Gunshot Skull Brain Injuries, via Nova Posta. And my older son already took this Nova Posta to deliver those books, distribute them across Ukraine to neurosurgeons who sent their addresses. But then they said Nova Posta isn't operating. Before everyone else, we converted my previous book to digital format. I started recording video presentations of 20 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes on how to perform neurosurgical procedures. Thanks to being the president of the Ukrainian Neurosurgical Association, I could share, and people received it, and immediately more than 1,000 views in 1 or 2 weeks. So all the neurosurgeons in Ukraine could take advantage of the experience from Mechnikov Hospital, which was in 2014. And after that, the idea arose to write a concise one. Not a big book, because now there's no one to read, and the youth don't like to read books. Call it Lessons of War, where it's written Lesson 1, Lesson 2, Lesson 3, 4th. In the authors are also the director of the Institute of Neurosurgery, Yevgeny Georgi Shpidachenko, the general director, Serhiy Anatoly Terezhenko, because he participated in the organization and training of the wounded, as well as the harmonium Yuri Cherednichenko that I talked about. And in the end, we brought those links. The links that I mentioned, where we couldn't send books by Nova Posta, but anyone can read our previous
And here's a video where
these lectures talk about how to conduct neurosurgical interventions. I mean, you know, now technology allows to point a camera,
and
scan a
close it
QR
with a
code.
quote.
Yes. And in YouTube, in open access, watch this operation. So I'd like to give you one of the books.
Thank you. I would take it myself.
I wanted to go back to the beginning of the war, when the so-called anti-terrorist operation started, when you met guys from Ilovaisk. At that time, you didn't really have any guides on how to treat people. Tell us where you got this knowledge and the journey you went through with your team.
Yes, indeed. My interns counted that I have experience in 3,500 operations. These are on brain tumors and more than 1,500 operations on cranial and brain injuries and wounds. But indeed, in 2014, when the war started, and I was trained in Potirek in military field neurosurgery and knew how to operate on those wounded. Therefore, urgent short terms were needed. In 2 weeks, we gathered all available literature about the experience of the Second World War. The experience of war in the North Caucasus, it's like Vietnam, everything in print, everything available online. It was all found and studied. And indeed, I personally operated on the first 40 to 50 wounded because it was my responsibility. The situation was such that the injured were brought directly to the head surgeon. Late at night, perhaps via helicopters, there was aero evacuation. I knew that during the day I work in the department, come home and have a few hours for dinner maybe. Close your eyes and rest for an hour because a call from work might come in and you have to go back. Back then there was no curfew, so we would arrive, begin operating, and sometimes surgeries would finish by 4 or 5 in the morning. And you realize there's no point in going home. You need to stay in the department and another call will come in an hour. That work day, we recalled Ilovai's. Yes, indeed, that chapter of Ukrainian history, the history of neurosurgery. I remember the day when the withdrawal from Ilovaisk happened and around 100 wounded arrived at the Mechnikov hospital. Most were seriously injured, 20 to 30 were critically wounded on artificial ventilation, extremely severe cases, and then 2 more buses arrived with injuries of medium severity. The day started with a call. It was a weekend, Sunday starting at 10 in the morning, and I finished operating on the 3rd wounded by about 12 at night. I operated on 3 in 1 operating room, and in the other 2 operating rooms, neurosurgeons, also my colleagues, were operating. And really that day is remembered because most of them came in unidentified, unknown. They just had a serial number written as they are numbered when they arrive at the reception disinfection department of Mechnikov Hospital and are assigned a number, and we keep track of this serial number. The 1st, 2nd, then came the 1000th, the 1001st. They were unknown, but later they became known. Every story can be told because these people are legendary. They dedicated their lives. But we managed to save this life and all those who operated her in August 2014 survived, and we are friends with them.
The world community is literally spending days and nights here in Ukraine and in Dnipro. You constantly have television, world leaders in the medical field, journalists. New York Times published you exchange experience. You've been presented by several editions where you can actually in live mode, in such wartime frame, publish certain things. I would like you to talk about these publications.
As for unique methods, it was in the Mechnikov Hospital that we managed, together with the endovascular center. There is an endovascular center where surgeries through vessels can be performed. Legends are working there too, both from Ukraine, Andrii Miroshnichenko, Yuri Cherednichenko, Vadim Perepelitsia, and they perform complex surgical interventions. I want to showcase in the Ukrainian Neurosurgical Journal on the first page the results of our operations together with American colleagues that were published. These operations are unique for Ukraine, so we can say that performing such interventions using such equipment, which American colleagues helped with, along with those computer technologies, allow civilians to perform interventions at the highest level. And indeed, it was accepted for publication, and we sent it to our American colleagues, and they replied to this. They were very satisfied, and we invited American colleagues I've told about to become members of the editorial board of the Ukrainian Energy Journal. And the Americans, who are world-renowned leaders, are currently members of the editorial board. Well, this is a unique edition. You could say one of the first publications of Ukrainian neurosurgeons, the journal Neurosurgery. This journal Neurosurgery, or there is a American Association of Neurosurgeons. They are called Neurosurgery neurosurgeons. And here is our joint article with American colleagues published. It is one of the 2 journals in the world that can be said to be the coolest, the most serious, and it publishes only those articles, those publications that can have a positive impact on the development of neurosurgery in the
We
world.
keep hearing that Russia should be an outcast in the international arena, but could it be isolated in the medical sector? Are they currently being blocked from accessing these advancements? Of course, these are open sources, but overall, to prevent Russia from gaining insights at international conferences on how to treat their soldiers as it's happening.
Well, I'll say this. As a doctor of medical sciences, a professor, I try my best to make sure Ukrainian neurosurgery is well represented at our conventions, congresses, and symposiums. And what I can say is that countries like the USA, Britain, and Germany, they are more strict about participation in these congresses by Russians, but there are organizations that simply look the other way and they remain collaborators. They invite, so to speak, Russians to moderate sections, give presentations made by Russian neurosurgeons, pediatric ones, and these pediatric neurosurgeons talk about how they treat Ukrainian children, but they don't say that you can't. They have forcibly taken tens of thousands of children from Ukraine to Russia without parents. They're holding them and ruining their lives. No one talks about this. That's why the war continues, not only on the front line.
And you?
Within the medical community, and that's why I believe it's the task of Ukrainian specialists to present Ukraine as much as possible, to make less room for Russians there. You can say, for instance, that Russians should not utilize our findings manuals. That would not be right, not humane, and as they say, Hippocrates would not approve. Why? Because yes, if it's a person in need, we should provide help. We rarely operate on the wounded from that side, those who were left behind, abandoned. Our soldiers, bring them to Mechnikov Hospital. We don't refuse, we operate. And I tell my colleagues, they say, Andrii Hrihorovich, we can't bring ourselves to operate as we do with our Ukrainian soldiers. I tell them, think about one thing. If you treat them and they survive, we can exchange them for our wounded or captured soldiers who are now in captivity. But even to say I am against the war, no Russian medics can, professors, academicians didn't say so. Therefore, first of all, it was decided to exclude all Russian scientists from the editorial board, not to invite them, not to let them participate. And so I support all my American, British colleagues. When they invite me, I ask, will there be Russians there? There won't be. Then I say, I'll participate and represent. And when I give a report, first of all, I talk about those atrocities, about our country. I show a house, show a video, show the number of people who died, talk about Dnipro, show all these cities, and say it's all against the civilian population. And it changes perceptions. Ukraine, in the eyes of neurosurgeons, neurologists, traumatologists, everyone who accepts. And after I shared this, showed Ahmaditaji very recently, then I discussed the organization of wound treatment.
Russia did us a lot of harm. And when it interfered with us, you have such a challenging task of operating and intervening with the body and removal. Now we see these fragments.
I took those fragments which were removed by me and my neurosurgeon colleagues from the brain. And you see here heavy, large fragments.
It's not something
And
else.
these are shell fragments. These can be mines, possibly filled with something else. Everything we encounter in these shells. And the most interesting, you know what, so with such a big fragment, people can survive if it travels at low speed. But sometimes there are small fragments. But if it's traveling extremely fast And we know kinetic energy is mass multiplied by speed squared. It can lead to fatal injuries. This illustrates that out of 10 mine explosive fragment injuries, they're from artillery. Unlike before, it was from Grad missiles, mines. Out of 10 mine explosions, there's 1 bullet injury, meaning 1 out of 10 mine injuries is bullet related. And over time, bullet injuries are becoming less frequent, while the number of other injuries increase. Caused by drones, dropped from drones, serious brain injuries occur. Additionally, glass fragments are found. As I mentioned, we operate on civilians. This is a civilian case. When there was the recent explosion in Kostiantynivka, he came to us. He went then to ATB market store to buy fishing gear, then went to withdraw cash from the ATM, and at that moment there was an explosion, and such glass fragments flew through the air, and they are extremely dangerous because they have sharp edges and acute damage. That's why we operate on civilians and civilian doctors. This is one of the last military, something like this, fragment of a mine with sharp edges flew under the skull base near the brain vessels. We conducted angiographic research, ruled out damage. We performed an operation on the brain vessels. His wife came, and we agreed that after the war, we'll definitely go fishing.
We currently have a very interesting statue in the studio. Where did you get it from?
It's on my desk, and it's a statue that inspires me. It's a gift from Professor Armondi Rock from Washington. It's like a memorial, a sculptural one. A combat medic, so that's a battlefield medic, and one of the first instances of their use during military operations. You see the medic bent down, and he inserted his hand. This will start intravenous infusion, a drip, but just the vial. This is what he's using his rifle, which he inserts into the ground and raises to level the liquid, enabling the drip. A bronze statue symbolizes this event. A tribute first of all to our soldiers, our military, our battlefield medics. Why Rocco Armonda? Because Rocco Armonda was once the leader of an advanced neurosurgery team in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and he was awarded the Bronze Star by the United States of America. That's why it's very close to him to help. Help in the military, help in the wounded, and he says much has changed for the better, especially at Mechnikov Hospital, compared to how it was in Iraq, Afghanistan.
Andrii, you have a very conscious civic stance. There is no other way. Firstly, you're a father, a man who has always lived in Ukraine. I know this year you have 2 special milestones, 50 years old, 20 years in the profession, 30 years of family life. Tell us about your family, what they're like and how they support you.
Yes, that's correct, but all this is planned for 2025, and there is still a few months left to celebrate these milestones. But the main celebration will be victory. I hope it should be in the spring of 2025. And after that, you can already celebrate personal anniversaries and professional ones. What supports me? First of all, my wife supports me. She's a doctor too. She understands everything. When many left the border, I suggested moving out with our younger son. She said, no, we are staying with you. My elder son, Bodan, supports me. He's working today. By the way, he's on duty as a neurosurgeon. He finished a 3-year internship and works as a neurosurgeon. We operate on the wounded together. Now he operates on the wounded on his own. And I'm proud that my son works during the war. In Ukraine, Dnipro, at the Mechnikov Hospital, Sviatoslav, less than 13 years old, helps the wounded. He even asks, may I join the rounds? Can I come into the operating room at least behind the glass? I want to watch the surgery. Are you sure you won't be scared? No, I'm not. I know all this because you discuss everything with your wife, with your mother, with your wife, Tatiana. I'm not afraid of it. I want to see, I want to learn. And that's why the support of family, it inspires. It's very hard though being in the operating room or during rounds. The siren goes off, there's an alarm, explosions in Dnipro. First of all, you think about family. You have to call your wife, you have to call your son and ask, is everything okay? Everyone alive? A bit of relief when you hear they're all right and you can keep working.
Modern medicine, it's absolutely legendary because it's being created under war conditions. How do you see our victory and what's your message to the people of Dnipro and its guests?
Put your heart into it and believe that victory will definitely happen. It won't come quickly, but it will come. When everyone helps, does at least a bit towards victory, we will definitely win. Even just a little support for the military, those who help medics, volunteers, those who provide supplies, those who bring equipment, those working in the Mechnikov Hospital and other hospitals. They work to help first and foremost the wounded, because wounded civilians and soldiers are number one, and they need to know this, and they should know that if they end up in the Mechnikov Hospital, they will be prioritized. Scheduled surgeries are postponed, but we always take the wounded and intervene, trying to do it in the best possible way we can. As for difficult operations, I take them on. Less complex ones are expertly performed by my colleagues.
Glory to the medics, glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.